The town of Harlan Creek, Montana, had made up its mind about Clara Voss a long time ago. Not all at once, the way a jury decides, but slowly, the way frost works into the ground by accumulation, by the weight of small things pressed together over many years until the conclusion felt as permanent as the earth itself. It had started when she was 14 and corrected the school teacher in front of the entire class about the date of the Battle of Gettysburg. The teacher had been wrong. Clara had been right. Neither fact had mattered as much as the third fact, which was that a girl had done the correcting, and in Harlan Creek in 1871, that was the fact that people remembered. By the time she was 26, the town had refined its position considerably. Clara Voss was too sharp, too certain, too quick to say what she thought, and not quick enough to soften it for the comfort of people who hadn't asked her to think in the first place. She ran the Harlan Creek Courier, a 4-page weekly newspaper that her father had founded in 1863 and that she had taken over completely 3 years ago when his eyesight failed him and he could no longer set the type himself. She said it herself now. She wrote most of the paper herself. She handled the advertising accounts, the subscriptions, the printing press when it jammed, which it did with the regularity of a difficult relative, and the occasional legal dispute when a merchant objected to something she had printed, which was accurate, about him. She was considered, in the particular vocabulary that Harlan Creek applied to women, it didn't quite know what to do with. A handful. She had dark brown hair she kept pinned back with the efficiency of someone who regards hair as a practical matter, not a decorative one. Gray eyes that had a quality of attention that men who were not used to being looked at directly often described, afterward, as unsettling. She was not tall. She was not loud. She was simply precise and precision in a woman. In Harlan Creek, Montana, in 1877, was its own kind of too much. She had been courted twice, if the word applied. The first time by a banker's son from Billings, who had come through on his father's business and had spent an evening at the Voss dinner table telling Clara what he thought about the newspaper business, while she listened with the expression of someone composing a response they have decided, for reasons of social peace, not to deliver. He had written her a letter afterward. She had not written back. The second time by a local rancher named Porter, who was a decent man, with no observable curiosity about anything, who had told her, with genuine goodwill and no apparent awareness of the problem, that she could keep writing her little paper after they were married, if it made her happy. She had thanked him for the offer. He had understood, eventually, that it wasn't an acceptance. The town's conclusion arrived the way it always did, in places of that size not announced, but present. Like weather. Clara Voss was too sharp for any man in the county to handle. She'd end up alone with her printing press and her opinions, and maybe that was what she wanted. Clara had her own view on this, which was that she wanted someone whose mind she could not predict before he finished a sentence, which was rarer than people assumed. She did not discuss this view publicly because she had learned early that expressing a want you haven't had met is ammunition for the people who think you should want less. She was not. And she knew this with the specific honesty of a woman who spends her evenings alone in a print shop with nothing but ink and her own thinking for company, entirely at peace with the situation. There was a shape to the thing she had not found. She could describe its edges without being able to name it. She had stopped expecting to find it in Harlan Creek. She was wrong about that. He arrived on a Tuesday in September. His name was James Calloway, and he had come to Harlan Creek because the territorial court had assigned him the circuit judgeship for the district, a position that required him to cover 4 counties, 2 of which had not previously had consistent legal representation, and all of which had more outstanding disputes than the previous judge had managed to address before his retirement. James Calloway had taken the assignment because the territory needed the work done, and he was the person available to do it, and because he was 37 years old and had spent enough time in large cities, watching justice move at the speed of politics, and had decided he preferred places where the problems were direct and the people were honest about them, even when that honesty was inconvenient. He came to the Harlan Creek Courier on his second morning in town because a new circuit judge establishing himself in a district needed the local paper, and the local paper needed to know about him, and because he had read 3 back issues of the Courier that he had found at the boarding house and had formed a strong opinion about the person writing them, which was that they were the most rigorous thinker in Harlan Creek and possibly in the district. He pushed open the door at 9 in the morning to the sound of the press running. Clara was at the back of the shop, feeding paper through the press with the focused competence of someone who has calibrated this particular machine so many times that her hands know the adjustments before her mind consciously registers the need. She heard the door and called out without turning around. "One moment." She finished the sheet, checked it, set it in the drying rack with the brisk efficiency of someone who does not hurry and therefore never wastes motion, and turned around. He was standing at the front counter with his hat in his hands, which she noticed because men who stood at counters in Harlan Creek generally did not remove their hats unless they were in church or speaking to someone considerably older than themselves. He was lean, not particularly tall, with dark eyes and the kind of face that had been weathered by travel rather than age, and an expression of such complete and undisguised interest in the printing press behind her that she found herself reassessing the visit before he said a word. "Miss Voss," he said, "I'm James Calloway, the new circuit judge. I wanted to introduce myself and discuss whether the Courier would be interested in covering the upcoming court sessions." "Judge Calloway," she said. She came to the counter and looked at him directly, which was her way. "I've been waiting for the territorial court to fill that position for 8 months. I wrote a piece about the delay in March." "I know," he said. "I read it. It was accurate." She looked at him with a fraction more attention than she had given him 30 seconds ago. "Most people who've read that piece come in here defensive," she said. "Most people aren't the person who eventually fixed the problem," he said. "What's your rate for legal notices?" She told him. He agreed without negotiating, which was unusual, and she made a note of it. They discussed the court calendar for the next 2 months. He answered her questions without qualification, without the circular non-answers she had come to expect from officials who feared being quoted. She asked him directly about 3 pending land disputes that had been unresolved for over a year, and he told her exactly where they stood legally and what he intended to do about them and on what timeline. She wrote it down. "You don't mind being quoted," she said, when they had finished. "It wasn't quite a question. If I say something I'm not prepared to stand behind publicly," he said, "then I shouldn't be saying it at all." She looked at him across the counter for a moment. "You're new to small towns," she said. "I've been in small towns before," he said. "Why?" "Because in small towns," she said, "that kind of consistency makes people nervous. It's easier to manage someone who says one thing in public and another in private. You can work with the gap." "You sound like you've had experience with that," he said. "I run a newspaper," she said. "I have experience with everything." He almost smiled. She saw it. He put his hat back on, said good morning, and left. Clara went back to the press. She ran it for another 2 hours. She thought about the conversation twice during that time, which was 2 more times than she usually thought about conversations after they had ended. He came back Thursday, which was the paper's print day, and therefore the worst day for visitors, and the day she was most likely to be forthright about that. And he came anyway, which told her something. "I'm interrupting," he said, when she looked up from the compositing block. "Yes," she said. "I'll be brief," he said. "I've read 6 months of your back issues. I want to understand what disputes in this county I've inherited that aren't in the official record. The things that are settled in the way things get settled out here. By agreement or pressure or just being ignored long enough, you'd know those." She set down the type she was holding. She looked at him. "That's not a brief question," she said. "No," he said. "I realize that. I'm asking if you'd be willing to answer it at length, at a time that isn't your print day." A pause. The press stood between them like a third party. "Friday evening," she said. "The paper runs Saturday morning. I'll have time." "Thank you," he said. He left without buying anything or making any excuse for the visit, which she appreciated in the way that people who dislike pretense appreciate its absence. They met Friday at the Voss print shop at 6, after the town had largely closed up and the light had gone amber and low through the front windows. Clara had made coffee, practical and strong, and she had pulled out the bound copies of the Courier, going back 4 years. And she talked for 2 hours about the county, the way she understood it, not the official history but the operating history, the Hendricks family that controlled the water rights for the South Valley and how they had come to do so, the church council that had effectively blocked the school expansion for reasons that had nothing to do with education, The ongoing landline dispute between two ranchers in the Eastern District that had nearly turned violent in 1875 and had been managed since by a fragile and unwritten agreement that no official had ever been made aware of. He listened the way she had never been listened to, which was without waiting for his turn. He asked questions that showed he had understood what she said and thought about it while she was still saying it. He pushed back twice on two factual points and was right both times, and she told him so. At 8 o'clock, when she had said what she had to say, he closed his notebook and sat back in the wooden chair across from her work table and looked at her. "I have to ask you something," he said. "Go ahead," she said. "How much trouble has the paper caused you personally?" he said. "Not professionally. The pieces about the water rights, the one about the school council, the one about Porter's landline issue with the Brennan family." She was quiet for a moment. "Enough," she said. "Define enough," he said. She looked at him. "3 advertisers withdrew in 1876 and told me directly it was because of the Porter piece. 1 merchant stopped speaking to me. The school board chair told my father at church that his daughter needed to learn her place, which my father took exception to in a way that was not quiet and that I am still occasionally thanked for. And you kept printing," he said. "The stories were accurate," she said. "If I stop printing accurate stories because they're inconvenient, I'm not running a newspaper. I'm running a pamphlet for whoever has the most money." He looked at her the way she had already learned to recognize, which was the particular look of someone who has heard a great many people say careful, qualified versions of what they think and is calibrating the difference. "The county is lucky to have this paper," he said. It was not a compliment arranged for effect. It was a statement of professional opinion delivered as fact, which was entirely different, and which Clara, who had learned to tell the difference years ago, received as such. She looked at her coffee cup. "Most people in Harlan Creek," she said, "would tell you I'm more trouble than the county needs." "Most people in Harlan Creek," he said, "are not the circuit judge." She looked up. He was looking back at her with the dark, steady eyes that she had found over the last 3 days, the quality of meaning, exactly what they appeared to mean. "Good night, Judge Calloway," she said. "Good night, Miss Voss," he said. He picked up his hat and left. Clara stood in the print shop for a minute after the door closed, the way she did sometimes when a piece of type was set and she had stepped back to read it before committing it to the press. Then she put away the bound volumes and locked up and went upstairs, and she did not fall asleep quickly, which was unusual for her. The town noticed, because the town always did. By the middle of October, it was known that the circuit judge had been seen entering the Courier office on 3 separate occasions that did not correspond to any filing of legal notices. By the end of October, it was known that Clara Voss and James Calloway had been seen eating supper at Mrs. Garrett's dining room on 2 Tuesday evenings, across a table, talking without apparent pause from the time the food arrived to the time it was cleared. Harlan Creek formed its collective opinion the way it had formed all its opinions about Clara, which was quickly and without sufficient information. The judge either hadn't heard about Clara Voss or hadn't been told plainly enough. It was Margaret Aldrich who ran the dry goods store and had known Clara since she was 4 years old and meant well in the particular exhausting way of people who genuinely care and express it through interference, who said it most directly. She said it to James Calloway on a Wednesday morning when he came in for lamp oil, which was perhaps not the setting she would have chosen in retrospect, but opportunity doesn't wait for settings. "Clara Voss is a fine woman," Margaret said, wrapping the oil with more deliberateness than it required. "But she's a great deal to take on. She's got opinions about everything. She'll argue with you in public if she thinks you're wrong. She's not," Margaret paused, searching. "She's not soft." James Calloway set money on the counter. "Mrs. Aldrich," he said pleasantly, "I'm a circuit judge. I spend every working day in rooms full of people who are wrong and want me to agree with them anyway. The last quality I need in my personal life is someone who doesn't tell me when I'm wrong." Margaret looked at him. "She's turned down 2 men already," she said. "The last offense." "I know," he said. "I asked her about it." He picked up the lamp oil. "She told me she couldn't find anyone who was interested in the same things she was interested in. I found that clarifying." Margaret stood behind her counter for a long moment after he left, with the expression of someone who has made an argument and found it answered from a direction she had not anticipated. It was a Wednesday in November when everything changed, and it changed because of the press. The Courier's printing press was a Washington hand press, iron-framed, purchased second-hand from a newspaper in St. Louis in 1869, and it had served the Voss family, without major incident, for 8 years. On a Wednesday morning in the third week of November, something inside the mechanism gave way in a manner that Clara diagnosed quickly and accurately, and that she could not fix alone because the component that had failed was in a section of the press that required 2 sets of hands to access safely, and her father's hands were no longer steady. Enough for it. She sent a message to the town's blacksmith, who came, looked at the problem, and told her he could fabricate the parts she needed, but it would take 2 days. The paper was due Saturday. It had not missed a Saturday in 8 years. She was standing in the middle of the print shop at 4 in the afternoon, with ink on her hands and the particular expression of someone working through a problem that does not yet have a solution, when James Calloway came in for what had become, over 8 weeks, something close to a regular Tuesday visit, except that it was Wednesday. He stopped when he saw her face. "What happened?" he said. She told him. He asked 2 specific questions about the mechanism. She answered them. He rolled up his sleeves, which she observed without commenting on, and said, "Show me." "It requires 2 people," she said. "And it's not clean work." "I've had worse assignments," he said. They worked for 2 hours. He followed her directions exactly, and without the particular male reluctance to follow directions that she had encountered before, which was its own small revelation. His hands were capable in the specific way of someone who has done physical work alongside legal work for long enough that neither seems more important than the other. She told him what to hold and when to turn, and what to brace against, and he did these things with the focused attention he brought to everything, and at 6:15 the press moved through a full cycle without hesitation. Clara let out a breath she had been holding for 3 hours. She turned to look at him. He was standing beside the press, with ink on his right hand, and his shirt cuffs, and an expression that was satisfaction and something else, something she had stopped pretending she didn't recognize. "Thank you," she said. "The paper's going to press Saturday," he said. "Yes," she said. "Good," he said. "The county needs it." She looked at him. The lamp on the work table threw light up from below, which was not a flattering angle for anyone, and he was looking back at her in the straightforward way he had, without performance, with the full and quiet weight of a person who has made up his mind about something and is waiting for the right words to say so. "There's something I want to tell you," he said. "Go ahead," she said. Her voice was even. She had a good voice for evenness when she needed it. "I have read a great deal of writing in my life," he said. "Legal briefs, court records, testimony, letters, newspapers. I have made a professional practice out of evaluating what words mean and whether the person writing them understood what they were doing." He paused. He looked at her steadily. "Your writing is the most honest I have read. Not merely accurate. Honest. Those are different things, and the difference is rare. And I want you to know that I understand what it costs you to keep doing it in a place that has not always been grateful for it." Clara was very still. "And I want to tell you," he said, "that I have been in this town for 9 weeks, and I have eaten supper with you 7 times, and I have come to this shop more often than my docket requires, and I am not confused about why." She looked at him. The press stood at her shoulder, iron and solid, running again, ready for Saturday. The lamp burned steady and warm. "James," she said. The first time she had used his name. "Yes," he said. "You've talked to people in this town," she said. "About me." "Some," he said. "And you've heard the general view?" she said. "That you're too sharp," he said. "Too certain, too much." "Yes," she said. He looked at her with the dark eyes that meant what they appeared to mean. "I've spent 9 weeks reading what you think and listening to how you think it," he said. "And I want to tell you that in this district, in this territory, at this moment, a newspaper that tells the truth about water rights and school boards and land disputes is not too much. It is exactly enough." He paused. "And the person writing it is exactly enough." Another pause. "I have not found that before. I want to be clear that I understand what it is." The Montana November pressed against the windows. The lamp held its circle of warmth. Clara Voss, who had written clear, declarative sentences for 8 years and prided herself on knowing what she wanted to say and saying it, stood in her print shop and was briefly unable to speak. Then she said, "I have a paper to run." "I know," he said. "And I have opinions about everything," she said. "I'm counting on it," he said. "And I will correct you," she said. "In public, if necessary." "You already have," he said. "Twice. You were right both times." She held his gaze. The thing she had known the shape of without ever finding its name was standing in front of her, with ink on its hand. "Ask me then," she said. He asked her. She said yes. They were married in April, a ceremony notable for its directness and its brevity, which suited both of them, and which the Reverend Hutchins privately considered the most efficient wedding he had performed in 30 years of ministry. Clara wore dark blue because it was practical, and she liked it. James wore his good suit. The guests were the people they had wanted to invite, which was a shorter list than the town had expected. Harlan Creek attended anyway, because it always did, and because a wedding is a story, and people who live in small places understand the value of a story. Mrs. Aldrich from the dry goods store sat in the third row and told her neighbor in a whisper she believed was quieter than it was that she had known from the beginning that they were well matched. The banker's son from Billings and the rancher named Porter were not present, being in other places, which was as it should be. Clara's father sat in the front row in the chair they had brought from the shop for him, and when the moment came, he did not try to hold anything back, and nobody in the row nearest him thought less of him for it, because they understood what it was to watch something you have hoped for a long time finally arrive, simply and without apology, exactly when it did. James Calloway rode the circuit in 4 counties and administered the law with the consistency that had made him worth assigning, and the directness that made people feel, even when he ruled against them, that they had been heard. He stopped traveling on Fridays, so he was home by Saturday morning when the courier came out. This became a habit, and then a fact, and then simply part of how James Calloway lived, which was with Clara's paper in his hand at breakfast. Clara ran the courier. She ran it the way she had always run it, which was without asking anyone's permission for what she printed. And she ran the legal notices for the circuit court as well, because the law needed to be public, and public meant the paper. She fixed the press herself when it needed fixing, which it did twice in the first year of their marriage. And the second time James was home and held the brace without being asked, because he had done it once and remembered. The town's opinion about Clara Voss, which had been in place for 12 years and had considered itself quite settled, revised itself in the gradual way that small-town opinions do, not with any declaration, not with any accounting of the past. Simply by the slow accumulation of a new set of facts, replacing the old ones, until the old ones felt as distant and improbable as a winter that has been followed by enough springs. She was, and this was said with the approval that communities extend to people who have found where they belong, exactly what this town needed, which she had always been. It had simply taken the right man to read every word she had ever written and understand them. Sometimes the world decides who you are before you've had the chance to show it. But the right person doesn't need the world's permission to see you clearly. They simply look and keep looking, until what was always true about you becomes undeniable. Your sharpness, your certainty, your refusal to be smaller than you are, those were never the problem. They were always the invitation, waiting for someone worthy of it. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you a moment of entertainment while carrying a small, sincere reminder that being exactly who you are is never too much. It's always been exactly enough.